Emergency lockdown. Businesses, schools, restaurants closed. Everyone ordered to shelter in place. Hey guys, it's Jara with Wicked Prepared. Welcome to the channel, everyone. Guys, this is not the video that I had planned to do for you this week. I was planning on doing a Walmart prepping video that involved me going into Walmart to get some video footage of the best items to stock up on at Walmart. But right now, as I'm filming this, parts of our state here in Maine are under a shelter-in-place order, and everyone is very on edge. So instead of going to Walmart, I decided to stay put, locked inside of our home where I feel safe. And I'm doing what any prepper would do, adapting to the situation and working with what I've already got on hand. I decided I would do a new meal in a bag recipe. This is an adaptation of a recipe that I really love that came from the Betty Crocker website. It's delicious comfort food, which is exactly what we need right now. Let's get right into putting this meal kit together and cooking it up, and then I'll talk a little bit more about the situation here in Maine and what we're going through a little bit later on in the video. Today's recipe is going to be a potato-topped oven Swiss steak casserole. And for today's meal, these are the ingredients that I'm going to be including in my bag. And the star of the show is going to be a large can of Keystone beef. This is the chunks of beef, not the ground beef. And this is a 28-ounce can. I also have a jar of gravy here. This is the smaller size jar of gravy. I have a regular size can of Italian-style diced tomatoes. I'm using the petite diced. I prefer those a lot of the time because the pieces are smaller so the kids don't mind them as much, but you can use whichever you like. I've got a can of sliced carrots. And for the topping, I've got some instant mashed potatoes. I've got 2 bags here. Now these are the kind that you don't have to add butter or milk to. You just have to add water. And with that being said, I also have 2 bottles of water back here that are going to go with this meal. And then I have an egg. Of course, I'm not going to be including a fresh egg in my bag meal because these are not shelf stable. So I'm just going to be using some scrambled egg powder in its place. And what I'm going to do with that powder is I'm just going to put it into a very small mason jar. This is a 1/4 pint jar. And that will keep it fresh inside of the bag and ready to use. So really quickly about the bags that I use, there's 2 different size bags that I use. They're both the same bag, they're just different sizes. So I'm using the larger size for this meal. They're kind of a plastic material. They've got a nice gusseted bottom that has a paperboard insert, so they're nice and strong and they stand up nicely on the shelf. What I typically do for these bags is I have a self-adhesive CD label kind of thing that I put on the front. And then I'll put the recipe right in here so it's right with the bag. And I put that on the broad side. And then on the narrow side, I just use my chalkboard labels to put one here so that I can label what the dish is, so that if I stand them that way on my shelf, I can read what the dish is. So either way I put them on the shelf, I can read the name of the dish. I get a lot of people asking me about these bags, so I will definitely have a link down in the video description, so make sure you look for that, because I have people asking, they're looking for the bags with the pockets on the front. Well, they don't come with pockets on the front, but I add the pockets on the front. And you could use anything you wanted for this. You could use like an index card stick-on holder or a photo holder, anything like that can stick on the front, or you can do it totally differently. You can slide your recipe right into your bag if you don't want to do it like this, because this is a little bit of extra expense. I have found bags at the Dollar Tree that are paper bags that are just about the same size as this bag here, but I buy these in bulk on Amazon, so I haven't done the cost comparison, but it actually might be cheaper to buy, 50 or 100 of these in the long run than it is to buy, maybe a 2 or 3 pack. I think it's a 2-pack at Dollar Tree of the bags, even though it's only $1.25. But you can use any kind of bags you want. I have done this in Ziploc bags. I have done these in little shoebox size, Sterilite boxes. You can use anything you want to contain these meals, whatever works for you. So now it's time to put the ingredients into the bag. Now let's talk about the beef for a minute. I'm using Keystone beef. I absolutely love Keystone meats. I want to thank Keystone for sending me a care package, a Happy Mail with a large can of each of their kinds of meat for me to use in recipe testing. But that is definitely not why I'm using the Keystone beef. I love Keystone meats. I've been buying them for years. If you watch my hauls, I know that, and they're really good meats. This is the larger can. It's 28 ounces. If you can your own meats, you could always use a quart-sized jar of beef chunks that you canned yourself. If you look at this can, this has no water added. So this is canned exactly the way that you would can your own at home. Just put the beef right into the jar with no extra liquid, and as it cooks, it puts that liquid off as it cooks in the canner, and it makes the liquid that's in the jar. So there is liquid in this jar, but it all came from the beef. So for that reason, I'm not going to have to worry about draining this can, because if you think about it, if I made this recipe the original way with chunks of raw beef that I put into my casserole dish, as they cooked, they would put off that same liquid. So this is going to be just the same as using the fresh beef. So I'm going to go ahead and add the beef. We're also going to be including some sliced carrots. I'm going to go ahead and put those right in. The sauce is going to be made up of the diced tomatoes and the gravy. Now I'm going to go ahead and get my scrambled egg powder ready. Like I mentioned, I'm going to be using this little tiny mason jar. And I only need 1 egg's worth, and 1 egg is equivalent to 2 tablespoons of this powder. Now you probably know, or you may have heard me say before, that 2 tablespoons is equal to 1/8 of a cup. So if you have 1/8 of a cup measure, use that. And if not, you can just use 2 tablespoons. I prefer to just measure once. I am going to use the mason jar lid so that this will be nice and airtight. Now, if you were planning on this probably being on your shelf longer than like a year, you could add an oxygen absorber to this little can or this little jar. The other thing you could do is you could use something like a Mylar bag, a small Mylar bag, because you only need to hold 2 tablespoons, and you could use that to contain your egg with or without an oxygen absorber. So I'm going to go ahead and add this egg right into the bag. I'm going to be adding the 2 bottles of water that we're going to need to prepare our meal. And I am going to put the 2 pouches of mashed potatoes right in here as well. So now all that's left to do is label our bag and put it on the shelf. This is sometimes easier to do if you actually put the stickers on the bag before you fill it, but either way works. And now it's all ready to go. If you want, you could also include a 9x13 disposable foil baking dish either in the bag or with the bag, because if you were making this in a power outage when you didn't have your dishwasher running or hot water or anything like that, you might want to cut down on dishes. That brings up an important point, that this dish is typically baked. And so if the power's out, you would need a way to bake it without power. And there's lots of ways to do that. I've heard a lot of people say they love their sun oven, and you can even make a solar oven. There are camp ovens that run on propane, and there are actually also camp ovens that set right on top of your camp stove burner that don't have their own heat source. We've used those before. The one we have, though, is actually pretty small, so I don't know if that would fit a 9x13 pan, whereas a propane camp oven does fit a 9x13 pan. I'll link one of those down in the description box. And then there's another type of oven that is really new to the market that's actually safe for cooking inside if you use the canned alcohol fuel. And so I'll link that one down in the description box as well. I haven't tried it out myself yet, but I'm planning to soon. We also bake outside a lot. When we're camping, we use a Dutch oven with charcoal, which is a really great option to have on hand. And if you really have no way to bake it, you could also do this dish probably in a large Dutch oven right on your camp stove and just cook it with the lid on. It would probably come out a little bit differently, but it would still be really good. Now I'm going to show you how this dish comes together, but I'm actually going to use a regular pan because I do have electricity right now. I do have access to my dishwasher, so I just don't want to waste a full disposable pan. I'm also going to spray my pan with nonstick cooking spray, but once again, if you didn't have this, it would be absolutely fine. There's a lot of times when the nonstick cooking spray really isn't as necessary as I've always thought it was, but I am going to use it tonight. So I'm just going to go ahead and put my base ingredients into the pan, and I'm going to mix them right up in the pan. I do have my oven running at 350 right now. The original recipe calls for this to be baked at 325 for like 2 hours with foil on the top originally, because originally you're starting with raw beef chunks, and so you're going to want those to slowly cook like they would for a beef stew or a pot roast or something like that. So these beef chunks are going to be already cooked. So I'm really just going to be putting it in long enough for it to get all warmed through before I put on the potato topping. So I put it at 350, and this is going to be very forgiving. So if you are baking in an alternative sort of oven, like a sun oven or a camp oven, sometimes they're hard to regulate the temperature. So this is going to be very forgiving. If you can't get your heat high enough, you're just going to cook it a little bit longer. And if it's a little bit too high, just have some foil handy. So if you need to tent it to keep it from, browning too much on the top, that you can. Now, some of these cans do require a can opener. So obviously make sure that you have a manual can opener in your emergency cooking supplies. Sometimes I'll actually put a little emergency, like military style can opener right in the bag with the meal, because those are super cheap. You can get a whole bunch of them for not very much money, and they're very small and flat, and they can dump right in the bag. We have an emergency cooking kit that we have in a tote that we have available for us to use if we need it. And it of course has a manual can opener in it. So if we were away from our home and we didn't have our manual can opener handy, we would have that. I'll link that video down in the description box below in case you're interested in seeing that kit. All right, so I've got my beef. Now, like I said, there is some liquid in there and there is some fat in there. That all came off the meat when the meat was canned. And that is going to be fine because it's just going to melt into the sauce, and it's the same as what would have come off the beef if we had cooked this from raw. If you want, you can pick out these chunks of fat though, the bigger chunks if you want, or you can break them up and mix them a little bit more throughout the dish, but we'll have a chance to mix this after it heats. That is a great thing about the fat being in chunks, is that it is really easy to remove it. Now I'm going to go ahead and add the gravy and the tomatoes. And we're not draining that, just putting it in as is. I'm going to go ahead and give this a little bit of a mix. And then I'm going to go ahead and add our carrots. Now typically I don't like to waste the liquid that's in these cans because in an emergency that's going to be precious, you know, the liquid in the cans. So I try to incorporate it as part of the recipe if I can. I do need a little bit of liquid to mix with my scrambled egg powder to make an egg. So I'm going to drain this off and save it, this liquid, and I'm going to use it towards mixing up my scrambled egg. Now I'm going to go ahead and add my carrots. Now to be perfectly honest, canned carrots are not really my favorite. I like most canned vegetables. Canned carrots on their own, I don't really care for. We never usually serve canned carrots as a side dish, but in a recipe like this, I think they'll be okay, and we do need a veggie in here, and carrots is what's called for in the original recipe. So I think mixed with all of these other ingredients, they're going to be pretty good. And who knows, maybe you actually like canned carrots. I know there are plenty of people out there who do. I'm just not one of them. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and put this in the oven right now. Like I said, it's set at 350, and I'm going to be letting this heat while I mix up the potato topping. And I am not going to cover this because I'm not stewing this beef. Everything's already cooked and it's got plenty of liquid in there, so I don't mind if a little bit evaporates out. So I'm going to go ahead and put this in the oven and let this heat up. And now I'm going to get started on mixing up the potato topping. So I've got my 2 bags of mashed potatoes here, and the egg goes in the mashed potato topping to kind of help set it up. And I do need 3 tablespoons of liquid to mix with my egg. This is really just going to be water and salt because that's what's put in with the carrots when it's canned. There's a little bit of orange color there, or yellow color from the carrots, but that's going to be fine in an egg. So I'm going to go ahead and measure out 3 tablespoons of this liquid. And then I can use the rest of what's left in here to mix with my potatoes as well, so that we don't waste any of that. So for the 2 packs of potatoes, I need a total of 4 cups of water, which should be about what was in these 2 bottles of water, but I am going to measure it just because I don't want to end up with too much. I have some extra because of the carrot water. I live in an old house and nothing is level. All right, so that's 4 cups right there. I do have a little bit left in the bottom of this bottle that somebody could drink with their meal. So what I want to do is heat this water up in order to prepare the potatoes. And so to cook the potatoes, I'm going to be using my little butane stove that I use all the time. I love this. This is what we keep on hand for cooking indoors in emergencies. And I am hoping that this pot is going to be large enough to cook these potatoes in. So I'm going to go ahead and put my water in, my 4 cups of water, and we're going to get it going. I'm going to keep that up pretty high because I just want to boil this water. I'm not worried about burning anything. Okay, so now that this is boiling, I'm going to turn it off. And I'm going to go ahead and add my 2 packs of potatoes right in. I do have a whisk handy that I can probably whisk these with. A fork might be better, but... All right, so now that the potatoes are mixed up, I'm going to let these cool a little bit. I'm still letting that mixture heat in the oven, and I want these a little bit cool before I mix up the eggs and stir the eggs in, because I don't want the eggs to just cook instantly when they mix into the potatoes. So while these potatoes are cooling, I'm going to go ahead and set them out of the way. And I'm going to mix up the scrambled egg powder and get it ready to mix in with the potatoes. So this is 2 tablespoons of the scrambled egg powder, and it just needs 3 tablespoons of liquid to make the equivalent of 1 egg. So I've got my 3 tablespoons here that I saved from the carrots, and I'm going to go ahead and add that in and just mix that up. It's going to look a little funny because of the orange liquid I used from the carrots, but it's just going to be mixed in with the potato, so it's going to serve its purpose very well. I am going to use this because I think I've got some powder in the edges of the jar. All right, so these potatoes have sufficiently cooled, I think, to make sure that they're not going to just cook the eggs right away. I'm just going to give them a little stir. And I'm going to go ahead and add in the scrambled egg. This is going to just kind of serve to bind the potato and firm it up a little bit when it's cooked. And the nice thing about using this scrambled egg powder is that there's no danger of salmonella with this particular scrambled egg mix that I'm using. So if that's something that you worry about, you're not going to have to worry about if this gets cooked through to a certain temperature in the middle or anything like that, which can be really nice when you're cooking in an emergency, because if you're using some of those alternative methods of cooking and baking, sometimes, you know, things can be a little bit more complicated. All right, so I'm going to move this aside because this is ready to go. All right, so here is the meat mixture. This is all hot and bubbly. And it took only about 15 minutes for the fat to melt away and be able to be mixed right in. And then I heated it a little bit longer to make it hot like this. So a total of about 25 minutes. But like I said, this is very, very forgiving. And you can also break up any of these chunks of meat that are a little bit bigger and get them spread more throughout the dish. And I do like to spread them out just in case I run out of potato, but I don't think I'm going to. This is quite a lot of potato. All right, there we go. I'm going to go ahead and put this back in the oven and bake it for 15 to 20 more minutes. All right, 20 minutes later, and there it is. Starting to get browned on the little tips. If I had done this with a pastry bag, these would have been kind of pointier and they would have browned up a little bit more. But look at this, it's ready to be eaten. I'm going to let it cool for a little bit. It'll cool and thicken, and then we'll go ahead and try it. Now that's good. That's definitely comfort food. Okay guys, like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, we're currently dealing with a scary situation here in Maine. If you haven't heard already, Maine just witnessed its most deadly situation of this sort. I don't know how YouTube likes certain words, so I'm choosing mine carefully, but I'm torn apart right now, guys. These were innocent members of our community. Just out enjoying their evening. You know, they had families waiting at home, or they were with their families. They had plans for the next day. They had their whole lives ahead of them. 18 victims, and I think they said 13 more were injured. Countless lives that will never be the same. This type of thing doesn't happen here in our state, or at least that's how we felt yesterday. My heart is with Lewiston right now, a city that I have lived in, a city I visit often, and a city where many of my family members still live. Everyone close to me is safe, but at this moment, the guy who did this is still on the run. They have no idea where he is, and we are praying that we will have some kind of updates on the situation, hopefully even before you actually see this video. But for right now, I don't think any of us feels 100% safe. He could literally be just about anywhere now. Closing in on 24 hours after this has happened. With that being said, immediately after this happened, residents of Lewiston and surrounding towns were told to shelter in place, and that order has now been extended as the authorities are continuing their search. So many businesses, restaurants, grocery stores, pharmacies, they're all closed. I'm on a lot of the community Facebook groups and pages because it's in my community. It's a place that I've lived and I know people. So I've seen all kinds of comments, people posting online, asking where they can find food because they have no food in their house and everything's closed, worrying because they're about to run out of their prescription medications, things like that. Having meals in a bag like the one I just prepared can help make sure that you always have a way to feed your family, even if you can't get to the store for an extended period of time. One of the people I saw comment had no food in the house because she had just been paid that day. And so obviously this is a person that's living paycheck to paycheck, and that makes it really difficult to build a stockpile. But this is the kind of thing that if you know somebody like that, you could help them out, you know, by giving them meals like this that you put together that they can put in their pantry and just have on hand. Having all the ingredients assembled together for a quick and easy meal like this can be a lifesaver and a comfort in a stressful time like this. I've seen so many friends expressing feeling exactly the way that I feel times like this. You just can't focus and be productive. This is simple. You've done all the heavy lifting ahead of time, and it pays off with a meal that you don't have to think about. I know personally, I was very thankful to know that my gas tank was pretty much full. One of the basic mantras of preparedness is never let your gas tank go below half a tank. I've been staying put for the most part, but I did have to go pick up one of my kiddos and bring them home. And the last thing that I would have wanted to do is be standing there vulnerable, pumping gas, knowing that someone like that is out there somewhere. Also keep in mind, there are new companies out there now, like Jase, the company that we use, and other companies like it that can provide you with an emergency supply of your daily medication. This is exactly the type of situation where that comes in handy. It doesn't necessarily have to be the end of the world, but situations like this that unfortunately happen all too often. Another thing on a lot of people's mind is we have a Walmart distribution center in Lewiston, in that city, and it's been closed down since this happened. People haven't been going to work, nothing's coming and nothing's going. That's a giant, huge DC that supplies Walmarts for many states around, not just Maine. So this is definitely going to have some ripple effects in the supply chain. People tend to get complacent, and you just can't do that because you just never know. This is not a time when I want to preach the importance of preparedness, but rather a time that I've realized personally how thankful and how fortunate we are to have meals, water, medications, and supplies stocked up in our home. We have the means to shelter in place and still be self-sufficient. And we're lucky enough at this point to be in a place where we can help family, friends, and neighbors who might not be as well prepared if the situation arises. And as we know all too well, a 24-hour shelter-in-place order can easily turn into 48 hours, then a 2-week lockdown, and even months and months of a complete change in our routine. Thank you guys for sticking with me to the end of this video. Let me know by leaving me a heart emoji down in the comments below, because I think the one thing that we need in this world right now more than ever is love. And if you liked the looks of this meal in a bag, check out this video up here where I created a cheesy chicken and wild rice soup meal in a bag, the perfect dish for those cold winter nights that we've got coming our way. I'm Jara with Wicked Prepared. Survive today, thrive tomorrow. We'll see you next time.